Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be ranking all of my Nomad cosmetics palettes. I like Nomad as a brand. I really like the owners. They're super sweet people. I have a little bit of affection for them because they were the ones to send me my very first PR. But aside from that, they have a very nice eyeshadow formula. Their mattes are excellent. They're consistently good. Their shimmers are improving and improving over time. Their themes are always really cool and their color stories are easy to use. So I have 6 Nomad palettes here and I'm going to be ranking them in order of my preference from least to most favorite. First off, if you want to see today's eyeshadow look, I'll link it down below in the description box. And secondly, Nomad Cosmetics is a destination themed brand. So they travel all over the world, they scout for locations, they choose somewhere, they build their palettes or their launch, sometimes it's not just a palette, around that location, the colors and the culture of that area. And then some of the proceeds from website sales go towards a cause which supports something in that area as well. So it's a really cool brand concept in general. In any ranking video, you have to keep in mind that it is really the preferences of the person who's making the video, and they might be subject to change because I think we often rank things based on how we're feeling at that time. And we go through seasons of life. Maybe you're in a really colorful season, and so the neutral palettes have to rank lower, and then a year later, you're feeling the opposite. You just love neutrals more than you ever did before, and colorful palettes are getting used less and less. So it's extremely subjective, and I think that's the fun of it. Don't be offended if we have different preferences. That's just where things land. Before I continue, let me mention that I have a code with Nomad Cosmetics. It is the code SHIMMERS, and it should save you 10%. It's going to be linked in the description box. It's non-affiliated, so I don't make any money. If you use the code, you guys only save money. Now let's start with the lowest palette in my ranking here today. It is, I think, the oldest one that I own from the brand, and it is the America's Parks palette. This is a couple of years old. I don't see any kind of date on the packaging itself. It was probably on the outer carton, which I don't have. And the reason that this palette is ranking lowest is not just color story, because I do love color, but also the formula itself. Like I said, this is probably the oldest one I have from the brand, and the formula is fine, but it's nothing very remarkable. I actually think this is a very good color story. I think it's a nice blend of neutral and earthy kinds of tones with some fun pops, but even those pops are very grounded. And because I do like neutrals now more than I used to, I might play with this palette more if it had a better formulation. It's just old, and I don't know that it's just the formulation itself. It might also be expired. I mean, the package itself does say 12-month shelf life, so it's probably 3 or 4 years old at least. I'm sure it's well past its expiration and might not perform as well because of that reason as well. But I think the color story is really pretty, and I don't get bad looks from this one. They're just not super exciting. They're not as dynamic as a lot of other palettes that I have. Therefore, I tend to reach for those. I do think it's pretty. It's just the lowest performing out of all of the Nomad palettes that I have. Another slightly older and now discontinued palette from the Nomad line is the Whistler Snow Lodge. I've had this one for a couple of years as well, and I was actually a little surprised that this one landed where it did, but let me tell you why. The matte formula, and this is across all of them, honestly, the matte formula is really nice. It's just the shimmers that have gotten better over time. These shimmers are not bad, but they're not super they're not very sparkly or impactful either. They're pretty, they're a little bit more quiet. The color story of this is very nice, but I find that it's also very expected. I think this color story is beautiful and it works together so well. And if you like really easy to build kinds of looks, then this is a great palette because everything's gonna work. It lays things out in a way that makes sense. You can grab quads or go in rows or columns, and whatever you do is gonna be fine. The palette's very well balanced in terms of lightness to depth. It has a couple really pretty iridescents. We've got inner corner highlights. This is a beautiful multi-chrome that's blue, pinky, purple, so pretty. And this white up here is actually like a white pink iridescent that's very nice. It's lovely. It's just not super creatively stimulating, we'll say, and that's why I brought it a little bit lower in the ranking, only because when I go into this palette, I don't feel that my creative juices are really stirred. I like the looks, and I recently did a look at this palette a couple of days ago. It's going to be a reel here on YouTube and over on Instagram, YouTube short reel, you know the drill. Probably coming relatively soon, or might recently have been published, using this palette. Beautiful look, very striking, but again, not super interesting. And I think that's why it's been brought a little lower in today's video, because it's not as interesting of a color story as the ones that are higher. I really did struggle with today because I had my definite top and then I had my definite bottom, and everything in the middle was very, very much in flux. I was thinking, well, I could put this here, and then, oh, but this one could deserve to be in this spot. And there was a lot of back and forth, but this is where I've landed again for today. Next, I have the Verona Love and Death palette, which I actually thought would be below Whistler's No Lodge, but this is what I'm saying about the color story. The reason that this one's higher is only because every time I do a look with this palette, I find it striking and different. For the palette itself, it's not my favorite. I wish that this pink side were not just monochromatic red and pink. I really wish that they had shaken it up a bit and done something else here, like brought in peaches, maybe some orangey colors to make it more varied like this side. I feel like there's a lot of disparity between the two. This side is fascinating, and this side gives me really cool eyeshadow looks. Sometimes I'll pull in one or two of the reddy pinky tones, but they're kind of built around these colors. I've heard so many people say that if they could have just had this half, if it were launched as maybe 2 9-pan palettes, I think this palette would have sold much, much better. This is just too monochromatic. But the reason that it's above Whistler is because the color story itself challenges me more than the Whistler palette, and I just like the final result more. Also, another surprise that this is higher, this one's got a lot of hard pan. The shimmers in this palette, they've all hard panned, and so it's actually a bit of a struggle to use the shimmers and get them from the pan onto the eyelid, whether you're using a brush or a finger. It's just a bit of a battle. But when they're on the eye, they're beautiful and they look so cool and interesting. And that's the only thing that's bringing this one higher than Whistler. It's a matter of being more creatively stimulating and having a more interesting result. This palette is also a couple of years old, although I do believe it's still sold on their site. Anything that's still available, I'm going to link in the description box, by the way. But this was given to me by a fellow YouTuber, and this is the Paradise Islands palette. It's quite large, and it's a very, very bright tropical island kind of color story. The palette has a little bit less depth than I would have preferred. I wish that maybe these two were actually quite a bit darker so that we could get more contrast. But every time I use this palette, I'm actually pleasantly surprised by the final look. I think that the performance is nice. The colors are very vibrant, they're pigmented, they're easy to work with. On the whole, I think Nomad has a very user-friendly formula, and the shimmers are pretty. This is one of those color stories that's a bit more jumbled, a bit more exotic and chaotic. It's not quite as expected, and because it's not as expected, I feel challenged when I'm using it to do something different, to do something interesting, to do something strange, or to pair odd colors together and see if I can make them work. That is such a fun challenge for me with eyeshadow. So this palette gives me that. And even though it's not the most impressive formulation of the bunch, it has to rank a little bit higher because it gets me excited. This now is the first item I've ever received in PR, and it is the Ireland Wild Atlantic Way palette. And this was released March of 2024, you know, St. Patrick's Day. I love green eyeshadow, so this one is definitely something that I appreciate. I was so glad to get their Ireland themed palette because I was thinking I'd love to go to Ireland. I love the music and the scenery is gorgeous and it's all green, and it was a good fit. I was so excited to receive in PR, and that is how I have really gotten to know Felicia, the brand owner. She's a wonderful, lovely person, and I'm just excited to get to chat with her because she's lovely. But this eyeshadow palette is their newest formulation, and it's very, very good. The mattes are amazing. They're very easy to work with. I also did a reel or short form content with this look as well, which will be coming soon to my channel or is already live. Have a look. It'll be there or is already there. And I was just really impressed at how easy these greens were to work with. They built, they blended. It was not a chore to work out the edges. There were no harsh lines. Everything buffed softly and just got lighter and lighter. I did a deep smoky look, so I think I started with this one, and then I buffed it out with that one, and then I deepened further with that and put the shimmer everywhere, something like that. But it was very, very, very good quality. And like I said, I think Nomad has a very user-friendly, beginner-friendly formula. So if this is a color story that you enjoy, you'd probably not be disappointed in the palette. It's excellent quality, it's beautiful theming, and it's ranking quite high because not only do I love green eyeshadow, but it has some beautiful shimmers. This is definitely an improved shimmer formulation from every other one in today's ranking. And they're beautiful colors. You have a couple more metallic colors. This is my favorite in the palette. I think Savage Beauty, it's very striking. You obviously have green and gold, and everything's just lovely. There's a little pop of blue, a little pop of neutrals. I've done at least 4 looks on my channel with this palette because when it was revealed, I did 2 looks, and then I went back a few days later and uploaded 2 neutral looks. So It's a good one. And my number one palette from the brand has been my favorite from the very beginning. I think it's possibly the first one I got, come to think of it. Second, I don't remember, but it is the Bosque Nuboso Monteverde Cloud Forest palette, and I just love this one so much. If you look at the artwork on the front, you see lots of bright tropical colors interspersed with a bunch of greens, and then there are animals peeking out from between the foliage. That's the theme for the inside of the palette as well. We have several green colors, and then the bright animals and plants that are peeking out from between the leaves. I love that concept. It's so creative, it's so effective. It creates this beautiful, well-balanced palette. This has a lovely arrangement of colors, and these are much more bold and vibrant than the Paradise Islands, for example, which is more pastel. These are like tropical rainforest colors in your face. You're not going to be able to get very many quiet looks from this palette unless you go in extremely lightly with your brush. Although the very first look I did with this palette was neutral, and I loved it so much. And it was long before I started to appreciate neutrals, so that was really saying something. It was a beautiful look. There's a multi-chrome up here that's pink, green, brown. It's very interesting. And even this one is a green, gold, yellowy sort of color, and then this one is like a dark forest green silver sort of color. Beautiful palette, lovely performance. I really like the quality of the shimmers in this palette. They're not flaky, but they're sparkly and they're glittery, and they're just lovely. It's a beautiful palette. It is so much fun to play with this one. I enjoy it every single time I use it. I'm tempted to go into it just for some highly vibrant colors if I want something to really stand out. This is my number one top favorite Nomad palette. And there you go, guys. That is my Nomad Cosmetics ranking video. One of my subscribers had mentioned some time ago that she wanted to send me a Nomad palette, which I didn't have, but that hasn't happened yet, so I figured I'd go ahead with the ones that I did have just to get it done, because it's fun to talk about eyeshadow and to rank palettes. I appreciate you so much for being here today. I appreciate your time. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Do remember to check the description box for information about Nomad, today's eyeshadow look if it's live, my Nomad Cosmetics playlist, lots of other stuff. There's a bunch down there, so have a look if you're interested. Also, the palettes I've mentioned today, if they're still available, are linked there as well. And remember, you can use my code if you want to save a few dollars. Thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye.